Good evening, everybody, and welcome back. Welcome back to NFR. Welcome back to Sunday night. It's time for SKR, Season 8, Round 10. We are in Portugal, a track that is not on the official F1 calendar, so drivers might not be as well practiced as usual on this layout. Maybe just not being just out on the track practicing as much. Lots of times tracks like Portugal, France, they get left off calendars because they're not on the official F1 calendar. Those tracks tend to fall to the wayside and guys don't practice. But I'm sure that everybody has been giving ample time to the Portuguese layout ever since they saw it on the calendar when the calendar was announced early on. Of course, remember tonight is also a sprint race. Means we're going to be having two races this evening, one shorter, one longer. And this is the beginning of that shorter. So basically what's going on over here is we're having a sprint race. This starting order is determined by a reverse grid order, which basically means the drivers that have been the fastest consistently throughout the season, they will be coming from the rear of the field. The drivers that have not been having a fantastic season, well, they'll be starting at the front of the field. Possible race strategies there from the game, totally unnecessary. There's probably going to be no pit stops in this race. I say probably, because if you do find yourself in some sort of incident with some sort of damage, you're going to have to come into the pits. But it's really something you don't intend on doing in a sprint race. You can see immediately the guys aren't as well rehearsed around here as the other circuits. Just the strategy here on the sprint race, so many times we see it almost identical throughout the leaderboard, maybe just with one or two cars rolling the dice doing something different. This time around we've got a pretty even spread of mediums and softs. Different drivers collecting different data and coming to different conclusions. Of course, exactly the same layout as what we see for MotoGP, with the exception of turn 5. Turn 5 in MotoGP, well, it's a little more shallow, which makes the F1 layout a few meters longer. Of course, this sprint race will also double as a qualifying session, because the order they finish in is the order they will start in for that feature race. Remember, just the top 8 can get points. First you could hear the red lights, then you could see the red lights, and now they're all gone. So it's going to be a Wakes versus Chums versus Skull versus Top Gun. Those are your top 4 into turn 1. And more importantly, what order do they come out of turn 1? Can be a tricky turn 1, really need to commit to it. Sometimes you can't see the apex when you turn in. You've just got to turn in aggressively and believe you'll hit it. So Wakes in the lead, then Chums P2, then we've got Skull P3. Said the slowest drivers would be coming from the back. Skull is by no means one of the slowest drivers, just means he hasn't had a fantastic championship. Means he's starting up the field and slightly out of position, because he is quick. He will be able to hold on to that position a lot longer than the cars around him. Wakes in P2. Then Skull P3, we've got a caution flashing on our screens. It's a yellow in sector 2, I believe it is. That's a Red Bull going slowly at the back, but he is back underway. So no need for concern. Chums leads at the front in the Williams awakes. He started in P1, now down to P2. Skull in P3. Doing all he can to hold on to that P3, but a very powerful DRS zone here at the Circuit Portimão. So he's going to have a difficult time holding on to that. If he's using all his battery, he's not going to have much left on the next lap, so it's a matter of time. Skull needs to pick up the pace, but for the time being, he's just being swamped by all the soft runners around him. Of course, those softs will drop off before the mediums do, and then the track will come to the likes of Skull and Levy, the drivers that started on the medium, but in the beginning of the race, they're just going to have to put up with this. We've got a Sauber going sideways. We see a Sauber ghosting to the left-hand side of the track. So one of the Saubers falling towards the rear of the field. I think that was the man who started on pole position. That was Awakes. He's going down the order. Not the way he would have liked to have started things. Chums, the man who started in P2, he's still doing a fantastic job up in the lead of the race. Just got a bad camera angle there, had to come back and check. Looked like something was missing from that Williams, but the Williams is indeed intact. We have a caution. As I mentioned it disappears. Then Levy P2, he's a quick driver. Skull P3, Top Gun P4. Got Harsh Cartoon P5, then Convoy, then Pantry Star, Afrodox making a return to the grid. Haven't read that name in a while. Then Virus, he's actually just made up a position on Afrodox. So the two Ferraris coming through the field. Harsh Cartoon P6, Virus P8. I believe this is the man that started right at the rear of the field in P17. Ulrich, already up to 12th, made up 5 positions in a matter of 3 laps. Of course, a track with lots of undulation, all natural undulation, unlike the Circuit of the Americas where all the hills are artificial. This is the real deal. This is the rocky south coast of Portugal. Of course, the circuit was designed for an F1 race to take place in 2012. We all know that didn't happen. The track had to wait another 8 years before it got a race. And that was only because it was in a year that Formula 1 couldn't find venues. Obviously hosted Grand Prix in 2020 and 2021 before disappearing off the calendar again. Before that, Portugal had a Grand Prix of its own before as well, but it wasn't at this circuit. It was a little up the road, about 2 hours up the road. Circuit SKR, still there, still an active circuit, still used for European Formula 3 events. Welcome to our usual viewers, Death Queen, Skull. Somebody else is in here, but they haven't made themselves known. Can't give you a mention if you don't give me a mention. Don't know you're here. Chums leads the way. Top Gun now P2, Convoy P3, Levy P4, Harsh Cartoon P5. What's happened to Skull? He's gone backwards down into P6, then Pantry Star P7, Virus P8, Afrodox P9, and Gotzi making up the top 10. Remember, only the top 8 score points in the sprint race, unlike the feature race where we get the top 10 in the points, just the top 8. And as well, that point structure very different in the sprint race, just 8 points for the victory, 1 point for P8. It's a qualifying session with the chance of picking up points if you're on the first 4 rows. So now the man at the rear of the field, Boinkies, we know he's a lot quicker than that. He's on a set of soft tyres, very far away from the rest of the field, so he'd be hoping for some sort of intervention, some sort of safety car, something to bring a halt in this race. Make the guys at the front have to second guess, double think. Otherwise he's just going to be trailing at the back. But those new softs will help him catch up. Not at any sort of rate that he can have a competitive race. The two Salbers, they were higher up the field. Now P14 and 15. Not a good night for Salbers so far. Ulrich P12, he made up those 5 positions within 3 laps, and then he's just sort of stayed there for the next 3 laps. He's got Andre just behind him in P14. Then we look at the Red Bull. On the odd occasion, we've actually got 2 Red Bulls on track, Spikes and Mr. Rem. Mr. Rem down in P16. His teammate Spikes just outside the top 10 in P10. Of course, still a way away from a points position. He'd have to get himself all the way up into P8. P10 is not enough in a sprint race. As for the front of the field, Convoy leads the way by almost a second, just under a second, just within DRS. And I appear to have muted myself. Convoy out front, we said he was just under that crucial DRS time. Now he's gone over it, 1.3 seconds now the gap, and he's also taken the fastest lap with him, a 1:18. Top Gun P2, he's going to have to react to that lap time, react to that gap opening up. Levy P3, welcome to that Ubuntu citizen. Good evening, welcome to the stream. Convoy leads from Top Gun, then we're watching Levy in P3 in the Haas, looking for a way past, staying close enough that he can try and force a mistake. Of course, Top Gun at the moment, he's trying to do 2 things. He's trying to keep Convoy within reach, and he's trying to keep Levy behind him. You just got to keep on applying that pressure and hope for the slip up. Of course, the Portimão circuit does offer some good overtaking opportunities. In fact, many people were calling for this track to replace Catalunya, but those wishes fell on deaf ears, as Catalunya will be replaced by a street circuit in Madrid, and this circuit will continue to collect dust. Side by side action on the main straight, and it's a Haas getting past a Mercedes. Levy up into P2, Top Gun down into P3, and now Convoy. He will have seen those names switch just behind him. He'll know Levy is now in some clean air, and he's going to be looking to close that gap. Top Gun wasn't able to stay in touch with Convoy, at least close enough to make any sort of a challenge. So now Levy, first task, get within DRS. Second task, start breaking down the Alpine driver. So still Convoy, then Levy, then Top Gun. We've actually got Harsh Cartoon in P4, Aphrodite, having a good drive on his return. Then Virus P6, Pantry Star P7, Skull P8, that's the final car in the points. Chums in P9, remember he started P2, Gotzi P10, then Spikes, Andre, Ulrich, Divan, Awakes, Mr. Rem and Boinkies. That was a pretty late yellow flag, but luckily just 2 laps remaining in the race. rather 3 laps remaining in the race. We cannot have a safety car at this stage. But not only is this your sprint race, this is also your qualifying session. This will determine your starting grid for that feature race that follows this shorter version of a race. Just 11 laps. Can afford to really just throw the car around, especially if you're on a set of mediums with no worries about getting to the end. Once you get to the feature race, things do change. You need to start thinking a little bit more long term. What tyre do you intend to start on? What tyre do you intend to finish on? And of course, if things go haywire in the race, by virtue of virtual safety cars or even full safety cars, or who knows, even weather, then that strategy you have played out in your mind could all be worth nothing. I don't think we should have any weather surprises because nobody's jumped into the comment section to let me know, and usually that's it's quite a big deal. I usually get told pretty quickly, and nobody's let me know about any weather, so I don't think we're going to get any bad weather in the race. But if you do look towards the skies, weather does look a bit, some would say, a little dodge. Convoy still leads, but that once comfortable lead has now disappeared. Just 0.2 of a second is the gap. This is the view from the back of the Alpine. Looking at Levy just behind him. Levy has dropped off Top Gun. Top Gun has dropped off Harsh Cartoon. So we've got gaps in the late stages of the race. This is the view from the man in P2 challenging for the lead. One thing the whole field has done really well is just 3 drivers with penalties. This track can be quite challenging on the track limits. That's about as close as you're going to get. Got right on the back of the Alpine. Thought he was going to go for it. And I think he looked at his approach to the corner and thought, okay, how am I going to finish the corner? So just tucked in behind the Alpine once more. Looking for a better opportunity. Gets squeezed to the outside for now, but he keeps on fighting, as does Convoy. None of these drivers want to give up. Every time we go into a corner, there's a threat of, are we going into the corner side by side? Levy right there on the gearbox, just 0.3 of a second away from Convoy. And remember, this is a track the drivers will be slightly less rehearsed at. And that means mistakes are never far away, they're always within the realm of possibility. Convoy, Levy, Top Gun. Divan now picks up a 3-second time penalty. That 3-second time penalty's got to hurt because it's right at the end. Is that Levy sideways? I believe that is Levy sideways, but luckily he crossed the line before he went sideways. So I think that is your final results. We'll just wait for the official results to work out any possible penalties that are in that field. We see penalties for Divan, for Ulrich. Made up so much ground at the start of the race. Literally made up 5 positions in 3 laps, and then just sort of stayed there. Of course, now a very short break between the sprint race and the feature race. There is no official break. The only break you're going to get is me reading out the results and then drivers getting ready to go again. So maybe about a minute tops. So stay next to whatever screen or device you're watching on. The feature race is about to get underway shortly. There is your sprint race results and the order for your feature race. Convoy P1, followed by Levy, Top Gun, Harsh Cartoon, Afrodox, Virus, Pantry Star, Gotzi, Skull, Chums, Spikes, Ulrich, Divan, Andre, and then towards the bottom of the field, Mr. Rem P15, Boinky 16, and Awakes, making up the field. And we're back. Of course, we're looking at an empty pit lane. Okay, it seems like everybody is leaving the lobby. Does that mean... Oh my. Well, that's a little disappointing, if I'm going to be honest. Of course, now we're just going to leave the lobby. A new lobby needs to be created so we can do a custom grid, start in the order we finished in that sprint race. So now we just need to be patient for a little bit, wait for a new invite, go into a new lobby. You might have heard me say, well, that's just disappointing. Had nothing to do about the lobby. I am familiar with that procedure. The reason I say it was disappointing is there were raindrops falling on the grid, and I doubt we are going to get a continuation of those weather conditions. A little bit disappointing. Could have had a very interesting scenario. Unpredictable conditions on a circuit drivers haven't practiced too much. We may now find ourselves in a situation where we will lose that rain. Of course, if you are watching, thank you very much for joining. We're just in a bit of a pause, waiting for a new lobby. Of course, unfortunately, the game options that the game allows means that in order for us to run our current format, we have to do it this way. We have to run one lobby, then break it up, join another. And hopefully we will be underway shortly. And there we go. That has happened many times before for some reason. When I quickly switch in between lobbies, the game kicks me out altogether. But we will just get another invite and we'll go through. EA Sports. It's in the game. Apologies for the technical stuff. That's just the game itself. Of course, if you're just joining us now, as I see the numbers have gone up a little bit, means you missed the sprint race. We're waiting to get underway for the feature. In fact, we're just waiting for an invite for the feature. Skull, Andre, if you guys are in the comments, just send an invite my way. Otherwise, the folks watching, they're gonna miss out on a feature race. So nothing yet. We continue to wait. If anyone in the comment section is also in the lobby, please send me an invite. The last thing I want to do is miss the broadcast. There we go, hopefully this time we'll have a little bit more luck. Here we go. And now will the invites come in. Yes, we have 14 in the lobby. Remember, the sprint race had 17. That tells me we're waiting 3 more drivers. We should be underway shortly. Thanks, Death Queen. I did get an invite. Not quite sure which one I picked, but to whoever who did send the invites, I saw a few of you did send them. Thank you. Appreciate it. Not sure which one I used. Was using the small screen at the time. Get another 1, 2, 3 viewers in the last minute. So, of course, you have missed the sprint race, but you've tuned in time for the feature. I had 17 drivers in that sprint race, and it was a relatively clean sprint race. Gaps did form over time. We didn't have any interruptions, no safety cars, no virtuals, just a few yellow flags. Nothing to be concerned about. Will they be able to repeat that in the feature? Of course, a much longer race, a race where strategy is much more important. What tire are you going to start on? How far into the race do you intend to go? Of course, it will be interesting to see what things look like at the start of the race. Remember, in that original lobby, it really looked like we were in for a wet race, which would have been very exciting. Unfortunately, with the lobby being remade, I fear we have lost that wet start. It's not very often that weather intervenes in one of these races. It does switch things up completely. And then also the level of rain. Time for inters is a time for wets. Brings a whole new concept to the strategy. Forces you to do something different. If I'm not mistaken, the lobby will be on approximate weather, which just means it'll randomly pick again. So if we do get wet weather, it'll purely be by chance. The more likely scenario is we've missed out on that. Few players beginning to ready up, which means we'll be underway shortly, and I'll be back in just a minute. Here we go, I'm back. Looks like the drivers are all readying up there on the right hand side. Means we're gonna get going. Of course, we had the sprint race earlier on. That race is now going to determine how we start the feature. No qualifying on a sprint night. Have that reverse grid order, reverse championship order for the sprint race start. And then all those quick drivers that had to start at the rear of the field. They've got that sprint race to try and correct their starting position for the feature race. Those drivers who are usually slower, well, they get a chance to start at the front and try and stay there as long as they can. And there we go. We're in the pits. And we're waiting to get going. Drivers will now be doing their final adjustments, their final touch-ups. Of course, what the new lobby does do is it breaks up parc fermé. So if you went with a setup and there was something you didn't absolutely like or would have liked to have tweaked in a normal race situation, you can't do that. It's locked under parc fermé. In a lobby like this, well, you've got a clear canvas. Select any setup you want. You can start from scratch, so if there was something you didn't like, you can change it. Of course, under parc fermé, just 2 or 3 things left that you can change. Everything else is locked. We should get the dual green lights, and we do. It's going to give all of these drivers their first taste at what the Formula 1 car feels around here on a full tank of fuel. Fortunately not, Death Queen. It looks like the new lobby has robbed us of the rain. I would have loved to have seen rain in this race. Already a tricky layout for the drivers because they wouldn't have practiced here as much. It's not on the F1 calendar. And then you add rain into the scenario and you could have all sorts of interesting results. But I do think that that new lobby has robbed us of the rain. Conditions do look somewhat similar, so maybe we will get rain, maybe later on in the race, but I don't see any of the drivers mentioning it. Convoy at the front on the formation lap. He's actually built up a very big lead. Might want to think about slowing down and backing up that field. He hasn't done so. He's already on the pit straight. I think that might be a bit costly for him. He's going to sit in that grid spot for an awfully long time. Remember, he's not just waiting for that car behind him to park up. He's going to have to wait for that entire field to park up. Where is Awakes? He's coming around that final corner now. Convoy would have been sitting there for quite some time, and sometimes what happens is you're not able to get as much temperature into those tires as you'd like on the formation laps already. When you park up the car, you don't have the preparation you want. When you park up the car for that long, I think all the work you did out there trying to warm up the tires, those tires are right back to ice cold. 5 red lights, then a pause, then they go out, and it's Convoy versus Levy. Top Gun P3, Harsh Cartoon P4. Is it going to be an Alpine coming out in the lead? Yes, it is. We've got, what is that, a Haas on the inside of the circuit? I think it's a Haas. That's Levy. Levy falling to the rear of the field. We saw a Haas on the inside. Not sure if he got pushed that way. Maybe outbraked himself. Maybe just found himself with absolutely nowhere to go. Things can get tricky at the start of the race, especially there in that turn 1. If you find yourself approaching that corner in the wrong manner, you're never going to make it. So things a little bit more messy at the start of the feature race than what we saw at the start of the sprint race. Levy looked like a real contender, now finds himself at the rear of the field, P17. Let's try and get a look at that Haas. Doesn't appear to have damage. I think that was just some time off the circuit and not necessarily any damage. Death Queen saying she thinks it's going to rain. Well, I hope it's going to rain. It would obviously make things even more interesting. Field already spreading out in the very early stages. Convoy running away at the front, a 120.5 now. Top Gun in P2, he's followed by Aphrodite. Driver on his return. Then Harsh Cartoon in P4. Skull P5, Iris P6. Ooh, and we've got some sort of issue. Okay, folks, so something has clearly gone very wrong. Seems like I'm having a few issues on my side. I'm just going to mute and try and get this thing back up online. I do apologize for the break in transmission. Hopefully somebody can send me an invite. I think I'm going to need more than one. Folks, as you can see, we're having issues on our side. You've all seen the perspective of when drivers get kicked out of a race and how frustrating it can be for them. Well, this is what it looks like from the commentary side of things. Hopefully we're able to get back in here real quick. And there we go, we're back. Hopefully that break didn't take too long. Looks like we have missed a few laps. It's lap 4 of 33. Nothing's changed at the front though. Convoy out front. The only thing that's changed is the gap. The gap now is a lot bigger. 6.4 seconds. DRS. Is that DRS enabled? Or DRS disabled? It is. It's DRS disabled. There's the raindrops. We went away. We returned. And the rain came with us. Convoy into the pits. And like I say, this changes everything. If you had the pace to start from pole and go on to win the race, now all of a sudden this does just mix things up. Brings your rain driving into question. Are you as quick in the rain as you are in the dry? And obviously just multiplies the opportunities to make a mistake when the track is slippery, especially in these opening few corners, before you get some tire temperature into those intermediates. Just trying to get to the tire screen. There we go, everybody going on to the intermediate. Lap 5 of 33. They probably would have preferred to start on the inter than to have a, what some would say is a pretty useless soft run, just 3 or 4 laps on the softs, and then they had to come in, put on the intermediate. Next question is, what happens with this weather? Several things could happen. It could remain like this to the end of the race. It could get worse, and we'd have to go on to the blue tyre, or it could go back to dry conditions before the end of the race. The drivers will have a much better idea than I do. They will have a approximate weather prediction in their cockpit. They'll have an idea. Won't be a spot-on prediction. Convoy said, was he going to be able to match his dry pace and his wet pace? Well, he's answering my question. 8.8 seconds now. In fact, that gap might be getting bigger and bigger even faster now in the rain conditions. So it looks like he may have taken a step up in performance. That's bad news for the rest of the field. Top Gun in P2, like we said, now 9 seconds behind the leader, and he's picked up a 3-second penalty to boot. Harsh Cartoon in P3, then Spikes P4. Afrodox on his return drive. If I'm not mistaken, only announcing tonight's drive a few hours ago. Then Skull P6. Confirming his drive just a few hours before the race, much like Ayrton Senna did in 1993. Of course, Honda dropped out of F1 in the off-season, and Ayrton Senna was having nothing of it. Took a loophole in his contract to leave McLaren, then realized he didn't really have anywhere else to go at the time. So just a few hours before the South African Grand Prix, no one was actually sure if Ayrton Senna was going to drive, before a race-to-race contract was agreed upon by McLaren. At the time, it was the record. He was being paid $1.5 million a race. Of course, money now, when you compare the money income back then, that was considered a lot to what these guys earn now. It's a little ridiculous. Of course, Lewis Hamilton going to Ferrari next year, £100 million per season, matching the salary of Max Verstappen at Red Bull, also £100 million. So starting to sound like soccer wages. Convoy out front. Fortunately for Top Gun, not much he can do. He has shaken off the likes of P3, so he's not defending, but not able to do anything about Convoy up the road. That gap getting bigger and bigger, 11.3 seconds. We've got Spikes in P4, Afrodox P5. First of the two Aston Martins. Let's ride on board with Skull, get a feel for these conditions. Of course, this is tricky. I mentioned a few things can happen. We could get these conditions right throughout the race till the end of the race. Could get dry again, or could have a situation that we don't see too often, but it could get even more wet, meaning they'd have to come in, put on the wet. You have to decide when is the right time. Got to time it perfectly. Of course, it could get wetter and then drier again. So these guys could be in and out of the pits for the entirety of the race. They'll be hoping for the latter. They'll be hoping for the race to settle down, either stay like this or dry up pretty quickly. Interchangeable conditions. Not good for the quicker drivers. They just want to get on with it. They know they've got the right strategy. They know they've got the pace. Any sort of interruptions, whether that's a safety car, whether that's a change in the weather, anything that's going to affect that initial strategy they had in their mind, it's the last thing they want to be doing. Convoy wouldn't mind if conditions remained like this till the end of the race. Top Gun knows if he's got a shot at the lead, he's going to need some sort of an interruption, because the gap at the front now 13.2. Keeps on getting bigger and bigger. Harsh Cartoon P3, he's lost contact with the Mercedes ahead of him. Spikes in P4. Then Afrodox. Afrodox looking for that P4, getting awfully close. If we were in dry conditions, there would have definitely have been an overtake. But in the wet, you've got to rethink your position. Side by side with the Red Bull, and he has pulled it off. That was a fantastic pass up the inside. Things can so easily go wrong in the rain. You think you've got the grip, and as soon as you enter the corner, you realize you've made a big mistake. But that time around, Afrodox getting it just right. Of course, Spike's allowing the space as well. Could have gone wrong if either driver had made a big mistake. Top three are still Convoy, Top Gun and Harsh Cartoon. Those cars are spread out by 17 seconds, so the top three very opened up. Spoke about the one Aston Martin in P6. This is the other Aston Martin. Andre down in P10. Final points paying position. Of course, in that sprint race, just the top 8 scoring points. In the feature race, top 10 do score points. 25 points for a victory rather than just the 8 points you would have got in the sprint race. So much more important race to be winning. See Andre getting awfully close to going up the inside there. Red Bull just had a bit of a squirm coming out of the corner. And again, had it been dry conditions, that would have been an overtake. No DRS available. The only thing the drivers have to play with is battery. The other cars around them, they're going to have that same battery. Ulrich picks up a penalty. That's the car, I believe, at the front of this DRS. Keep on calling it a DRS train, even though there's no DRS. But there's a close battle here of 4 cars. Ulrich leads that battle, and in an attempt to hold on to position, he's picked up a time penalty. Something you've got to think of when you're in the race, when you're looking to hold on to that position for maybe another half a lap. Or maybe you're looking for that little extra tenth or two in your lap time. Going over your track limits, whatever little tenth or two you're looking for, going over your track limits, what you're going to lose in penalties is far more than anything you're going to gain. Welcome to Visor. Welcome to Visor in the comment section. Fortunately, there's no League v League on Tuesday, Visor. What are we going to do? Convoy out front, then Top Gun, Afrodox. Those top 3 remain the same. In fact, Harsh Cartoon was in P3. Afrodox has taken that position. It's now 4.1 seconds down the road from Top Gun in P2. It's going to be the first time he gets some real clean air in this race. He's been having to make overtakes all the way. So now let's see if he can have an impact at least on the P2 driver. As for Convoy, well, he's almost a pit stop worth up the road. Of course, once the driver starts to get into this sort of territory. Yes, Visor, Afrodox is back. He only announced this drive a few hours ago. And he's back and he's up into P3. It's not a bad return. Convoy out front, as mentioned, almost a pit stop worth of a gap. That's when your opponent can really start to play with you. When somebody comes in at the end of the race, makes an extra pit stop just for the sake of stealing the fastest lap, that's when drivers get into the realm of being able to do such things. We don't see it often. The leagues we broadcast, the fields, always relatively close together. You get your quicker drivers, you get your midfield drivers, but there's clumps of them. But as far as Convoy goes, it's been the class of the field. 18 seconds at the front. Nothing the man in P2 could do about it. Afrodox trying to close the gap, get himself up onto the second step of the podium at very least. Of course, this changes strategy altogether. Remember, if you can make that medium last, then there's no need for a pit stop. You can stay out there on that medium, on that inter rather. Of course, the drivers will have a good idea of what's happening next. They'll know, is this track going to dry up? Is it going to get worse? And with that knowledge, they may be looking to extend this intermediate until the change of weather. Last thing you want to do is come in, put on a new set of inters, and then in 3 laps time it dries up. Of course, from the comms box, all we can do is look at the evidence. We don't have any weather reports, so we go on board with the drivers, have a look, and that is definitely still very wet conditions. Don't need to be worrying about anything drying up for now, but crucially not a lot of standing water around the circuit. When you start to see puddles of water around the circuit, well, that's when you start to think about the blue rain tire. Fortunately for everyone out there, no sign of that for now, no evidence of that for now. It's still a very wet race. Of course, next week on the channel, things are going to feel relatively quiet. Past 3 weeks we've been doing 5 streams a week. Well, there's going to be no stream on Monday because SAFRL is on a break. League v League came to an end last week Tuesday. There's going to be no Tier 2 SAFRL either on Wednesday. So it's going to be a quiet start to the week. Don't know what I'm going to do. Maybe I'll upload random old races from the league. Of course, SKR still holds the 3rd most watched video on the channel as far as live broadcasts go. SKR does travel with quite the fan base. We saw that in the League v League on the Tuesday night. Lots of people tuning in, supporting SKR. You can see tonight, got a few of you in here. For what is a very interesting intermediate Portimão circuit. Awakes, picks up a 3-second time penalty. One of the things I said in the sprint race was I was quite impressed with the fact that there wasn't a lot of penalties on a circuit I find quite tricky to stay within the white lines. But then in this feature race, I thought penalties would be less likely because they're in the rain. They're less likely to get on the curbs, get over those white lines. But I've been proven wrong because we have quite a few penalties on our screen. 6 drivers now into the penalties column, and we're not yet at halfway race distance, just lap 15 of 33. We're riding with Ulrich, one of the 2 Alpines, his teammate up in P1. This is the second of the 2 Aston Martins and currently running in the field. He's just made up a position as a result of Pantry Star's pit stop, and Ulrich has retired. We've got a caution in sector 1, I believe it is. Just keep our eyes on that track. No sign of a safety car for the time being. So caution in sector 3 rather. I said sector 1. Looks like still no sign of a safety car, so I think we should be back underway shortly. That's the last thing Convoy would want. Give up a 23-second lead because of a safety car. Of course, these drivers probably know what the next 30 minutes of driving is going to look like. We have to play the guessing game when it comes to weather. As I was saying, he was feeling a safety car. Well, he almost got his wish. He almost did a Commentators curse from the comment section. That is a new one. The drivers aren't safe from the commentator. Now the drivers aren't safe from the comment section. Imagine how bad it would be if we had lots and lots of viewers. I don't think any of the drivers would make it to the end of the race. Every time they got a compliment, we'd be under safety car. So Visor asking for a safety car, Ulrich retiring from the race, but not providing us a safety car. Now we go back to the back of the field. Chums, P16, he's done something different. Is this something we don't know that the rest of the field hasn't done yet? Is this a roll of the dice, or was this a mistake? We don't know yet. It's the only car in the field on a set of wets. We'll ride with him a little longer. We want to see how this car is reacting in the rain. Of course, that isn't a mistake. I thought one of the options was that his pit crew put on the wrong tyres, but he has stayed out, so definitely not a mistake. Goes to the inside of the track to pick up as much water as he can. Maybe he's gone onto that soft a little earlier than he would have wanted. Maybe there is harder rain coming. Maybe this was just a roll of the dice. Still some flat spots on the circuit. So, from my perspective, I'm not really sure if the weather is the same or if it's getting worse. A very brief caution. That's all it is. No safety car for now. No virtual for now. We haven't had one in the sprint race. We haven't had one in the feature race. Everyone pretty much behaving themselves, with the exception of Ulrich, who retired from the session, but we didn't get a chance to see that incident. Don't really know what happened. Ulrich explaining that that was a forced retirement. Real life calls. So not an incident from Ulrich, just a voluntary retirement. And the reason we didn't get a safety car is the retirement was done the correct way. So take note, drivers. Came into the pits, retired the car. That way we didn't get a safety car. If he had retired that on the circuit, might have had a safety car, and that could have potentially influenced the result of this race. Divan picks up a 3-second time penalty. Every time you pick up one of those penalties, you're making your race that much more difficult. And of course, in a scenario where you get a safety car right at the end, if you've multiplied your penalties, well, it's also going to cost you a race. Just having a look at the penalties column, and while Aphrodox is having a fantastic return, and he looks very pretty on the timesheet, but if you look at his penalties, he's up to 13 seconds. Of course, 10 of those will be served in a pit stop. That'll bring him back down to 3, equal to the other two drivers in the top 3, but then Divan also on 16 seconds. He's going to serve 10 of those now in the pits. You can see that Salva just standing stationary. Those pit lane penalties so much more harsh in F124. Of course, in F123 and the games that came before it, used to be a 5-second penalty. Quite the jump to get a 10-second penalty. Affects your race a lot more now. Sitting there for 10 seconds sometimes feels like you've been sitting there for a minute. Start to think the lobby's broken. Start to panic. I haven't spoken much about this driver, Spikes B4, having a solid race. Just currently off the podium. But with those drivers ahead of him having penalties, still within a shout. Difference between P1 and P2 is now beyond a pit stop. 27 seconds. This gets that gap up to 40 seconds, and we're looking at a gap of 2 pit stops. Insanity at the front. Divan appeared to be ghosting for a while, and now he's just gone off the circuit. Hopefully that was not his rear wing. That may have been his rear wing. We saw the rear of the car just take a smack into the Armco, and I assure you, if he has lost his rear wing, he's probably not going to be out on track much longer. Losing a front wing can be painful. Can't turn into the corners. Feels like you've got no grip. Losing a rear wing makes these cars quite undrivable, especially in the rain. If you knew the rain was coming and you loaded up on downforce, now all of a sudden that car will feel absolutely undrivable. Just go back and have a look at Divan. He has come into the pits. No, he hasn't. He's retired. Divan has retired. I believe he did also retire in the pit lane, did he? We've got a caution. No sign of a safety car, and the caution has disappeared, so I believe he also retired in the pits. That may have been rear wing damage. We saw him take quite a knock to the barrier. No blame can be put on the driver for retiring in a situation like that. Car becomes quite undrivable. And with another 13 laps of weather like this, how much longer would he have stayed out there anyway? Might have forced an incident that forced the safety car. So instead just brought himself in, called it a night. 2 retirements now. Divan and Ulrich. We're down to 15 drivers. 3 drivers at the rear of that field. 13, 14, 15. They're on wet tyres. The rest of the field on the intermediate. Mr. M has also recently come into the pits, but he's put on a new set of intermediates. So he has a different idea. From Gotzi, Chums and Awakes, they believe the track is getting worse. Mr. M believes the intermediate is still the tyre to be on. It's always such an interesting situation to watch a field that is undecided on the strategy. Opens up everything. One thing it won't be opening up is who's going to win this race. Really, the only man that can stop Convoy at this stage, it's Convoy. If Convoy makes some sort of big mistake and takes himself out of the race, that's really the only way. So Convoy will be his biggest rival, his own biggest rival at this stage. Just needs to keep the car in line, keep the car on track all the way to the end. He's done a fantastic job so far. Car just sliding ever so slightly at the rear. That's when you know you're at one with the car. Car is sliding here and there, and you're all just taking it in, making it look so smooth, making it look like it's all part of the plan. Any other driver would start to feel the car getting squirmish and dive into the pits. Other drivers can adapt that little slide into their driving style and drive around it for a while, and that's the difference. Fredox gets up into P2, but look at the gap, 30 seconds. And I don't get to say it very often. Usually I'm talking about tenths of a second, or at very least seconds. That is a gap of half a minute. Luckily for all the drivers, it's not a 100% race, just a 50% race. If Convoy still had another half a race to go, that gap could get scary. That's the sort of territory you get into when you lap a field. term that seems pretty ridiculous today, but back in the 90s, as far as, well, the 80s, the 90s, it was quite a common thing to happen, where an entire field got lapped. I believe it happened at the opening round in 1997 in Australia. Two McLaren Mercedes. Adrian Newey's newest design, not much has changed, showed up in Australia. Extremely fast. Combination of chassis and the Mercedes engine being the best engine of that particular season meant that they came out of the blocks flying, qualified P1 and 2, took the front row and went on to lap the entire field to finish 1 and 2 in the race. Convoy leads the way, 31 seconds, so the gap not growing at an alarming rate anymore, but it is just holding station. Then Afrodox, further second behind is Top Gun. So P2 and P3 not yet decided. Of course, one of those drivers, I forget which one it is, I think it was Afrodox, let's just confirm. Afrodox has that 13-second penalty, so Convoy's got a 3-second penalty, Top Gun's also got a 3-second penalty. Afrodox, the car in between those two, he's got a 13-second penalty, so when these drivers do eventually pit, he's going to have to spend a lot of time sitting there in the pits while his opponents pull off into the distance. Of course, he'll be hoping for a safety car. You can serve that 10-second penalty under a safety car when everybody else is going around the circuit much slower than they'd like. It means you're able to get some of that time back, and in some cases get away with it altogether. But we have seen no evidence of safety cars this evening, not in the sprint race, not in the feature race, not even as far as a virtual. Everybody having behaved themselves, just the two retirements, both those retirements were in the pit lane. So no incidents out on track. And at the beginning of the race, I thought that would be the opposite. I thought here is a circuit that drivers probably don't spend as much time on. With the combination of the rain and maybe the slightly less practice, thought we might have a quite chaotic race. Unfortunately, no chaotic race. Convoy just showing the rest of the field what is possible to extract from one of these cars. Afrodox P2, 9/10 of a second back to Top Gun in P3. Then he's got a nice gap down to Spikes in P4, but Spikes has no penalties, so Spikes would steal a podium spot at this stage. Harsh Cartoon P5. In the top of the Aston Martins, they've been in this order throughout the race. Skull has been the top Aston Martin throughout. I didn't know you could do that. Look at that. There's a side view. Good to know for next time. Then the second Aston Martin, you can actually see his teammate just up the road from him. They're currently separated by a scarlet red Ferrari. Of course, Skull will be very familiar with that Ferrari livery because he drives for Ferrari in another league. Not sure which one. One of them. Of course, if you are a SAFRL fan, remember that their season has just come to a close, but we do keep all of our previous live broadcasts on the channel, trying to build up a bit of an archive, so you can always go back and look at any race you want. in the seasons we've broadcast. Same for SKR. Building up a playlist. So anytime you want to go back and look at a race, anytime you want to go back and confirm something, everything is there for you to go back and watch. Of course, drivers have asked in the past if they're allowed to use footage from the channel to make shorts and videos, and all the footage on the channel is available. You may take it, you may clip it, you may do what you want. And I will try and get more onboard action of the drivers. I've seen people asking in the comment section for more onboard action. Just as for today, not really a lot of battles on circuit. Here we have Skull, Virus and Andre. These are probably the three cars in the closest proximity to each other on the circuit. In dry conditions, the Ferrari and the second Aston Martin, they would have DRS. Skull would be a bit of a sitting duck. Now, we didn't see that coming. Was that a mistake? The Ferrari of Virus sort of just went offline. Andre went around the outside. Took a lot of bravery to go around the outside in conditions like this, but he pulled off the move. And now, Aston Martin, P5, P6, no penalties. This is turning out to be a good race for them. Skull will now have to react. Of course, it's a little different when the car in your mirrors is your teammate. Anybody else you would be defending that position for everything you've got, especially in conditions like this. Sometimes you know there's DRS, there's no point of holding on to the position for too long, just wasting your own time and your own tires. Next DRS zone, the guy's going to get past you in the rain. It adds that element of being able to defend, being able to use your battery to stay in front, so you can defend from the driver behind you. But the problem is when the driver behind you is your teammate and he's faster, it brings up a lot of questions. But for now, Skull stays ahead, Andre able to match his pace. That gap remains between 6 and 7 tenths of a second. Will the Aston Martins switch positions? Or will they simply follow each other to the end of the race? Still a few laps to go. Convoy out front. Nothing has changed. He's been out there since the start of the race. Then 36 seconds adrift is Top Gun in P2. He's not defending from anyone at the moment. He's got Spikes in P3. Somebody's gone down the order. That was Aphrodite. I think Aphrodite has made a pit stop. Yes, he has. And unfortunately for him, look where he's come out. He's come out in a stream of cars. In conditions where it's going to be quite difficult to make an overtake. Aphrodite knows he needs to get on with it. If he's going to have any sort of undercut, this is the worst case scenario, because he came out in a flood of cars. Convoy, then Top Gun, then Spikes. And the Spikes has no penalties next to his name, and he's only 3.4 seconds adrift from Top Gun. Top Gun has that 3-second penalty, which obviously translates to that gap being a lot closer than it looks. Look at that, 3.1 seconds. Remember, 3-second penalty, so that's really just a gap of a tenth of a second. Spikes will not have to pass Top Gun on circuit to get that P2. Just needs to stay within that 3-second mark and make sure he doesn't pick up a penalty himself. Aphrodite. Bit of an up and down race for him. He'll be really disappointed. With that 10-second penalty, it would have taken a lot of bite out of his race. Impressive for all these drivers out front. Look at that, 25 laps on the inters for the leader. Then 24 for Top Gun in P2, 25 for Spikes. Everyone taking these intermediates as far as they possibly can. I'm sure to the end of the race, if there was no potential to get to the end of the race, no one would have extended the tyres this far to begin with. We didn't know what was going to happen when the rain started. Was it going to get worse? Was it going to get dry again? Conditions have remained exactly the same. A few drivers have chosen to go out on the wet tyre, and you can see them, they're all at the bottom of the timing sheets, so that clearly was not the right strategy to go with. Convoy, Top Gun and Spikes. Top Gun has reacted to that 3-second barrier. Now 3.5 seconds, so he will hold on to his P2 if things were to end this way. Of course, we haven't checked the penalties in a while. Aphrodite 6 seconds, so he was now picking up a further 3. Awakes on 19, and then crucially for P1 and 2, 3 seconds apiece. Don't think Convoy will be too concerned with his 3-second penalty. Top Gun has a concerning 3-second penalty because Spikes is just 3.5 seconds adrift. Any sort of mistake in that closing lap gives away half a second. He's going to not only give away half a second, he could give away P2. So Top Gun will be under pressure on tyres that are, I'm sure, well past their peak. Convoy from Top Gun from Spikes, then Harsh Cartoon P4. Never really looked like a race contender, Harsh Cartoon, but he's had a very strong race. Very consistent race. He's just done what he's needed to do, and he's going to get to the end of the race and pick up a nice handful of points. Aphrodite P5, he is in a good position, but we all know those penalties are next to his name. We did see Spikes going wide around the last corner, so while he doesn't have penalties, I'm sure he does have 1 or 2 warnings next to his name. He'll be on his toes trying to stay out of that penalties column. The only way he can steal P3 is by staying out of that penalties column. I don't see him making up 3.5 seconds in the next 2 laps. Mercedes versus Aston Martin, especially in these conditions, sometimes a little difficult to tell which one is which. We've got a caution. Fortunately, it's a little too late in the race to trigger a safety car, but we've had a retirement. It's the retirement of Awakes, which means we've lost both Salbers. Both Salbers retiring from the feature race in Portugal. And luckily for all the drivers, or unfortunately for all the drivers, that came probably 1 lap too late. No safety car triggered, so the race is almost over. So Skull is actually now traded places with his teammate. He was the lead Aston Martin for, well, the great majority of the race. He's now down in P9. His teammate's up in P6. So there's Aston Martins have traded places. Andre can't do much about Aphrodite on track. That's a gap of 6 seconds, but he may be able to beat him through the penalty sheets. So Andre just needs to stay out of the penalties column. Could potentially take P5 in this race before he can worry about that penalties column up the road. He needs to be able to defend from this man. He's got a Ferrari behind him. Every time he looks in the mirrors, all he's going to see is red. We've got Pantry Star. He's fallen a little bit adrift from Virus. He's got Skull just behind him. Skull obviously trying to have a bit of a recovery drive, claim some of those positions he lost in the last few laps. He was as high as P5 at a stage. So Martins were looking at a very strong finishing position, still a decent finishing position, both cars in the top 10, both cars in the points. They would have loved to have brought them home in P5 and 6. As for the leader, where is he? He started his final lap. In fact, not only has he started his final lap, he's in sector 3 of his final lap. So going around the final corner for the final time, Convoy up the hill and over the start finish line takes the victory. We now have to go back to the man in P2. He's in sector 2. That's Top Gun. Of course, we keep on joking about the lead gap, but Top Gun has done a fantastic job himself. He's been there in P2 the whole time. He hasn't made a mistake. He's defended that P2 when he needed to, opened the gap when he needed to. He's driven a fantastic race. Didn't have enough for Convoy. Wasn't able to hang on to him, never mind challenge him. But he was able to do more than enough to secure P2. Top Gun over the line, then spikes. And now we're just going to wait for those official results before we read out anything else. Of course, penalties will come into play. Some of these cars might jump up and down the order before we get the official results. We now wait for Aphrodite. Up the hill he comes, and then the Ferrari. I think the Ferrari is actually just going to take that position as a result of the penalties. So I say we're just waiting for those official results. And that, boys and girls, was round 10, season 8 in Portugal. Andre, driver of the day. There's a brief look at your podium finishes before we get to the results. There's 17 of them, so I've got to go quickly. Convoy took the victory, and by quite a margin. Also took the fastest lap, so 26 points on the night, plus his sprint race victory. Oh, that's not good. I've lost my positions. What's happened there? All my positions have disappeared from the screen. Fantastic. F124, always surprising us. Not sure what happened there. All our results disappeared before I was able to read them, and we didn't even get a timing screen. So, of course, top 3, driver of the day, you are invited to the cool down room as always after the race if you want to have a bit of a chat. But as for now, no results on our screens. So unfortunately, on this very rare occasion, I'm not able to read out your results. There we go. We're now going to bring in some of these drivers. We've got 3 in the cool down room. So it seems like one driver's not making an appearance, and now my laptop's just deciding to do its own thing. So we will eventually bring the drivers into the cool down room, and there we go.
Spikes pitted the first lap, and then I pitted a lap after, same as you.
Okay, so we've got the drivers in here now with us. Heard you guys talking a little bit amongst yourselves there, just like the real life cool down room. Guys, how was that? Obviously Portugal track not probably practiced as much as other circuits because it's not on the calendar. You don't see it as much, and then throw in a bit of rain on top of that. Did you guys enjoy it?
Yeah, it was better in the wet than the dry for me. But
100%.
no offense, Nando, but yes, the Portuguese can't build a track.
Well, luckily it wasn't built by Portuguese. You can
Yes,
put that on Herman Tilke and a lot of
yes,
other hideous circuits around the world. But
yes.
no, it is
No, it was
it is an
quite a
interesting
difficult
circuit.
race.
Who just said that was a difficult race? Was that Convoy?
No, that was me. That was me.
Thought that was Convoy
Yes.
for a second. I was like, no, you are now you finished 30 seconds or 35 seconds ahead, whatever it was. I don't know if you saw on the stream, my results like disappeared like as soon as the race ended. So I didn't actually get to read out the results, but I think Convoy was about 35 seconds ahead there. So I thought it was him saying, no, it was a tough race. And I'm like, well, it would be pretty scary to see what a good race looked like.
Well, normally it's a quite a difficult race, and especially in the rain, it makes it much more difficult.
Did you guys like set up the lobby to rain, or was that just random?
That was
Because
random.
if it was random, that means it was meant to rain tonight. Obviously, we had the sprint race, and then at the start of that feature race, we leave and we create a new lobby. And at the start of that feature race, there was drops falling. So we got a new lobby, we got a dry race, and the rain came anyway. It was always going to happen.
Yeah,
Just
no, it was set on random.
Yeah, it did say on the MFD that the rain started from lap 1, but it didn't give us an option to start on inters. But I'm glad it didn't because it was dry enough for the first 2 or 3 laps.
obviously always difficult when you have to start on one compound and you're not going to be there long.
Yes.
So I, I missed those first few laps because we had a problem with the stream. I think I only got on board at like lap 4, and that was when the guys were coming out on inters. So I'm not sure. Did you guys all start on the soft, or
I started soft.
Yes, I also started on softs.
because you knew you were only
Yeah,
going to go 3 or 4 laps?
Yes.
I started on the mediums because on the radar it didn't really show when the rain would come. So I actually hoped that the rain would stay away a bit, and then everybody pits,
I
and then
believe
the rain comes, and maybe I can jump them like that.
I believe that's the difference in that weather setting. There's a weather setting that says approximate, and I can't remember what the other one is, but I think it's set to approximate. So it'll tell you
It is, yeah.
there's rain in the race. It just won't tell you when exactly.
When? Yeah.
And the most frustrating situation, at least it came early enough, because sometimes you get Jeff telling you, like on 3 different occasions, that it's coming in 15 minutes. So at least you got it early and you didn't have to wait on Jeff. Guys, we still
Well,
got obviously SAFRL is on a break now. Their season has come to an end. The League v League came to an end. Very quiet on the channel. Are you guys racing anywhere else? Are you guys racing on Thursday night, or are we waiting to see you next week Sunday?
We actually have an off-season calendar. There's 3 tracks that we're driving on Mondays. So you can join if you want and stream it if you want. If you want to keep the stream going, you can just go and check there in general chat. There's a general check-in as well. We're doing Brazil tomorrow, and then Zandvoort, and then Brazil, Portugal, and another track. I'm not sure
Are you doing
what the third
Portugal
one
again?
is.
Portugal again.
Yeah,
Oh,
fell for
fantastic.
Mr. M.
At least there will be a bad luck.
Once you've driven a great track, you can't give it up.
Yeah.
Let me check for you quickly. Where the hell is it now? I know it's Brazil tomorrow. Oh, here it is. Yeah, it's Brazil, Portugal, and Miami
Okay, good
for the next
mix.
3 Mondays until the new season starts.
Good mix of circuits. So there will be off-season races on the channel. Don't know if we're going to broadcast all of them, but we will probably
I think we
broadcast.
can't hear.
We will broadcast at least most of them.
No, I don't hear you.
You can't hear me. Oh, that's strange. They can hear me on the stream. But anyway, I'm going to call it a day on the stream. So if you've been watching, thank you very much. If it's your first visit to the channel, remember to subscribe. If it's not, remember to leave a like. And we'll probably
I
be
think
back
we need
tomorrow with Brazil.
to leave this VC. It's some technical errors.
To everybody at home, cheers. Okay. Can you guys hear?